Join me as I run through some of the best choices for lighting your band on a budget. When it comes to creating an unforgettable performance, the right lighting setup can make all the difference. We all focus on our audio gear, but lights set the mood, enhance the performance, and it can even elevate the energy of the crowd. That's why choosing the best lights is crucial for any musician looking to take their live show to the next level. But let's face it, finding the perfect lighting setup can be daunting, and it can be difficult to know where to start. Budget constraints are one of the biggest hurdles for many bands. High quality lighting equipment can get really expensive, and it can be a challenge to justify the costs, especially when you're a smaller or you're just starting out. So in this video, we're going to focus on lighting your band on a budget. Predominantly, we're going to be looking at LED fixtures. And when choosing LED fixtures, I always opt for units with RGB or RGBW LEDs, as they will give you the maximum amount of output per LED. If you see fixtures that have individual red, green and blue LEDs, then you are only ever getting a fraction of the power of that light, depending on the colour it's putting out. All the models we're going to look at will have DMX, so that if you want to try that later, you can. But for now, we're just going to kick into it with our first set of lights. Let's start with the bread and butter for every band, PARs and bars. These continue to be a great option for bands because they're generally really cheap, they're really flexible, and they're really small, both for storing and on stage. So I'd recommend, no matter who you are, you have a few of these in your lighting setup, as they're a great option for lighting band members no matter where they're positioned. The first set I've picked is actually a pretty generic band from Amazon, and that's going to be the same for a lot of these. They might go under different names, but these ones are called L'Elite and they come in a 4-pack. Now the important part is to always look at the spec for these general lights, because they might share names, but if the spec's the same, they're probably the same unit. And some big brands actually use these generic lights. If you look at the spec, if it looks the same, as in physically, and the spec looks the same, it's probably the same unit. So these Elite are 84 watts, which is pretty impressive for a PAR. They're built out of 14 6-watt RGBW LEDs. That gives you loads of output. They've got both 4 and 8 channel DMX control, which is really simple to understand if you're just starting out. And if you don't want to touch that, they come with a remote control and an auto program, along with sound to light mode. They can be master slaved off to each other, so you can just join them all up, click a button, and you've got your lights. Super simple. It's got to be noted, these are plastic enclosures, and generally this is the thing that kind of divides more expensive units and cheap units. We're going to see a lot of plastic. It's a little unfortunate. You just got to be a bit more careful, put them in bags, put them in cases, they'll be fine. They've got metal brackets though, and that's the bit that matters, because that's how we're going to put it on the floor or attach it to any kind of bracketing or light array. The best part with these lights is you get 4 for £110. That's $27.50 a light, super cheap. If you did break one, not the end of the world if you've got to go out and buy another. And the next lights are a similar vein, similar pricing, but they're slightly different. These are the BeTopper LED stage lights, 60 watts. Now, the thing you'll notice straight away is they're a 60 watt unit and they're made out of 61 watt RGBW LEDs. On paper, a worst option, but there's 2 reasons why you might want to go for this. Number one, if you've got more LEDs and one dies, then you are probably going to be fine. You're not going to really notice if one of your 60 LEDs is out. If you've got 14 and one dies, that is a slightly bigger problem. The other thing is it's got much better diffusion. Because we've got more LEDs spread out, the light isn't going to be quite so harsh, so it will look a little softer on everyone's skin. Now, I've had really, really good experience with BeTopper as a brand, as a cheap brand that is, and so I would probably go for them again. Now, like I said, these units are probably called something different all over the world. Maybe drop in the comments below if you know what they are in your area, but for us they're called BeTopper. And the best part about these lights is they have a CRI rating of 90. That means when you pick a colour, it's going to be that exact colour over all of the lights. There won't be any differentiation, which could be really important to your show. But otherwise, they're fairly similar to the light above. They cost $140 for 4, so you're talking about £35 a light. Still really reasonable. I would probably sway towards these lights if it were my choice, but both are great options depending on what your usage is. The set that I've had for a really long time and I think are great, and that's the ADJ VBAR PAK. It comes with 2 sets of V-bars, and it comes in a really nice little case, really easy to transport around. I have broken the front lenses on mine a few times, but the actual LEDs inside are absolutely fine. And it's a great alternative if you don't like the round cans and prefer that slim bar look for them to sit on the floor or attached to a speaker pole. They are a bit more expensive though. They're £160 for 2 of these with a case, leads and a controller. And they only consist of 5 4-watt RGBW LEDs in each bar. They're really good quality. They've got quite a high output, but don't expect too much from these units. One option a lot of bands go for are all-in-one lighting bars. They seem like a really good option for lighting both the band and the crowd, and they give you lots of angles of coverage because it's a bit higher up and you can kind of shine down on everyone. And it gives you quite a few pars or effect lights all in one. They sound really good, but 1 or 2 really isn't enough. They generally have quite low quality LEDs in them and generally like 3 in each par. So I would probably stick away from these units for the most part. But if you want this similar look for less money and more power, then you can just get a standard T-bar. There's this Tiger T-bar that costs £30 on Amazon. And if you grab those Elite or BeTopper pars, you could have a full unit for £140, £160, which will destroy any pre-made unit you can find. However, if you're really dead set on buying one of these units, one I can recommend is the Starville Stage Quad. It's got 7 4-watt RGB WW LEDs for each head. It's DMX controllable. It comes with a case, which is probably the only reason why I'd go for this solution. And it comes with a foot switch controller, which also is pretty useful if you don't want to get into programming. They're about £195 a unit, but you do need a pole for them. I know they do some bundles sometimes where it includes a pole for not much more, and it's not really an issue to do that. But if I needed to buy one of these, this is the one I would probably buy. Now, the band has been lit up from the front and everyone's looking good. It's time to talk about backlighting. This is useful for creating a more dramatic performance with more movement. It helps to outline the band members if you're against a dark background, and you know, musicians like wearing black. So it's a really good way of kind of keeping that separation between the background and your musicians. And it creates the look of more movement on stage, especially if you've got musicians who are stuck at mic stands. If you've got those backlights kind of pulsating, pushing, flashing, then it adds this extra depth of movement that kind of adds energy and helps with the crowd dancing along. Now, the big mistake that I see most bands doing with this is they end up buying the LED light tubes. ADJ, who I mentioned earlier, do the LED color tubes, which are super cheap, kind of £35 each. But they're really not good for this function. They're kind of decorative lighting and they don't do backlighting very well. They've got really low quality, low output LEDs in them that don't help to work as backlights. They cast very little light. They break super easily. Those fins, they're going to be gone within a month. And they only show a few colours. And most options just do not have DMX. So they can't be synced together. And really for backlighting, synchronization is pretty key to making it work effectively. If the movement is all broken up all over the stage, it just kind of doesn't come over very well. So even if you're running an auto program, that looks way better than having each light individually running its own program, which is your only option for most of those light tubes. Best budget option for me, and the option that we make use of the most, are the Equinox Spectrapix. These are 50 watt units, but they are made up of 224 0.2 watt RGB LEDs. So, you know, there's not a huge amount of power there, but there is enough power. They've got 0 to 800% dimming, but the kind of most important part is they've got 18 zones of color, and they're controllable with up to 48 channels of DMX. So there's loads of really nice looking built-in DMX effects that look nice, and there's loads of room for programming if you're confident to do that. They put out enough light on full power when the whole stick is lit up that you can do that backlight thing, but maybe not the best option. We actually have 10 of these in my band, and with 10 they look really cool, but that's a lot of lights to buy. But the bonus is they're pretty cheap. They're like £85 each. You can buy a foot so they can stand upright, which looks really cool, and they're just easy to knock around. We've only had a couple break, and we've been running them for like 180 gigs. So I think this is a great option if you're on a budget. You can buy a couple and then a couple more and build it up like we did. And they look really, really good, even if you're just running the built-in auto program. Another option some people go for is the Chauvet Freedomsticks. And I think that's a fairly good comparison because you can actually get those Spectrapix with built-in wireless and batteries. They just cost quite a bit more. And the Chauvet Freedomsticks are not expensive when you compare them to that unit. They come with wireless and a battery, which is so useful. You can just literally chuck them out of the bag, you're set up, it's done. But they only have 32.2 watt LEDs, and that is not enough power to backlight, really. They're much more of an effect light than a backlight. And the worst part, they cost £600 for 4. It does come with a case, but that kind of hurts the budget a bit. I didn't worry about having wireless and a battery if I can get away with not paying £600. You can get loads of those Spectrapix units for 600 quid. And if we're talking about backlighting with loads of power, then we can't forget about blinders. Blinders are a great option for backlighting if you want a really dramatic performance. If you can, I would always get more blinders with less cells in them and spread them out between the band than to get 2 really powerful blinders and put them kind of in the middle. It looks a bit weird. Maybe just get double blinders and spread them out. It'll look way better. It will be way less jarring, and it's probably the way to go. So here are 2 really good blinder units that won't cost you a fortune. With blinders, I would really focus on getting these DMX'd up. It looks a bit bad if they're just always on, no one can see the band, and you really want them to flash at poignant moments. So having them on a foot switch is a really way of getting around DMX or around having a lighting engineer. But for the most part, you probably would want these DMX'd up, or you would want it kind of timed in with your tracks, which is another option, or a lighting engineer. But if you've got a foot switch, it could look quite cool. So here are 2 generic options that could work well for you. This one is a 100 watt Cobb quad blinder. This will probably blind most people without much difficulty. They can be controlled over DMX, obviously, and they come with a really solid metal chassis, so you're probably not going to break these. The reason for that, all blinders basically come with a metal chassis, is because they get really hot. So don't leave them on. Even the LED ones, they will still get hot. But for £200 a unit, they're an absolute steal. This second set is a dual cob blinder, so if you can't afford lots of those 4 cob blinders, maybe go for these dual cob blinders. And these are really cool because they've got LED rings. So not only are you getting a 50 watt blinder, which is still going to blind most people in most venues, but you're going to get these cool kind of accent rings spread out whenever they're not working. Because the thing with blinders is they're going to be used intermittently. So it's a lot of money to spend on something that's just going to flash every so often. So having these LED rings, I think, could probably look really nice, especially on a really dark stage. They only cost £133 a unit, which is an absolute steal in my books. Another option can be somewhere in the middle, which is high-powered LED bars. These are much like the VBAR, but they're bigger. You can stand them up at the back just like the Spectrapix, but they're going to blind people. They're pretty powerful still because they've got so many powerful LEDs just in one unit. My choice for these are the Showtec Pixel 12s. They're more focus power than the Spectrapix. You've got 12 4-watt RGBW LEDs with lenses, and they're 48-channel DMX, so you can control each LED individually if you're inclined. They're still pretty affordable. They're £210 a unit, and I think this makes a great middle ground. If you kind of want the blinding effect and you also want the moving backlight bars, this is probably the best option for you, but it will take some programming to get that to work. And finally, we're going to talk about moving heads and washes. Most people won't think of these as band lighting. This is much more kind of guest or dance floor lighting, but a moving wash works really well for this kind of backlit, lots of movement effect for really cheap. These generic moving heads from Amazon have got that wash par on them. If you stick them at the back, maybe either side of a drummer, and they've got that kind of just moving around pattern, they look really nice at hitting everyone at different angles and creating that movement on stage that we really want to do. The best part, they only cost £65 each, which is a bargain. They're basically disposable. And there are a few brands that make these washes if you want something that's a bit more well respected. Now, the cool thing about these ones is each head has 7 15-watt RGBW LEDs. Super powerful. They're going to be able to do that blindery thing without being stuck on all the time, without needing DMX patterns, although you can link up a DMX controller and have the program running. But if you're not inclined for that, you can probably just stick these on auto and they'll really add loads of movement to your band. I wouldn't go for the gobo type head just because that's a bit too focused and it probably won't add much, whereas this moving par will work really well for backlighting your musicians and creating this movement effect that we're after. When it comes to choosing the right lighting setup for your band, it's essential to consider the specific needs and goals. Are you looking for a high energy light show or a more subtle and intimate atmosphere? Do you need lighting that can easily be programmed and controlled, or are you looking for the maximum controllability for a more hands-on approach? Answering these questions can help you choose the right lighting setup for your band. And all of the lights above can create these moods and atmospheres depending on what you're after, but you need to pick what is right for you. Now you've got your lights set up, you might be thinking about your speaker choice. So why not check out this video here? And if you're looking for some more tips and tricks on live gear, be sure to subscribe and check out some of my other videos. And if you've got a favorite lighting setup or favorite cheap light, let me know in the comments below. Cheers.